Hello and welcome to this episode of Beef Tips and Gravy. I'm John Houston, Director of Business Services for ProTrition Feed, and I'm excited to be standing here at the Middle Tennessee Research and Education Center at the Heifer Development campus for that facility, and I'm proud to have with me Hugh Moorhead that works here at the facility, also Kevin Thompson, which is the director of the Middle Tennessee Research and Education Center, and also Charlie Slogner, who is also the day-to-day manager of this Heifer Development Center. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this video. We thought it was important to talk about as we continue our series on beef cattle, to talk about stress and how we handle cattle and should handle cattle in a low stress environment. And one of the things the Heifer Development Center spent a lot of time doing since its inception, gentlemen, is thinking about handling cattle in a low stress situation. So Hugh, I just wanted to start out with you just a little bit because you were here when all this came about several years ago, and Co-op was able to be a part of the early development of this center, and talk to us just a little bit about all the equipment that's here from a cattle handling and working situation, and kind of how the metal fabrication plant at Co-op worked with you to do that. So.
Well, we were scheduled to take cattle on October the 15th, and they showed up here about the week before, and we were still putting panels together the day before, and but they fell in and really helped us get the thing where we could start off on the right foot. They also provided every piece of equipment that's in this barn, and worked really well with us in figuring out how to set up the pens where the cattle would flow correctly and without stress on them and us. We utilize a bud box system instead of a sweep tub, and they were very helpful in setting that up and getting it in the right position to work for driving the cattle down the chute. And we really appreciated all the help that they gave us in that early day. So
Hugh, I know over the years there's not been a lot of changes in the way that the flow and the way that the thing, so it must be working. I know every time I've been here, it looks the same. So,
yes, sir. We've only bent one panel in the whole 7 years. I only had to replace one panel. So.
And I will go on that there was one adjustment that Kevin reminded me about off camera. One of the things that works really well at the Middle Tennessee Research and Education Center is working with horses.
Yes.
And I know a lot of facilities, research facilities, are using horses now. And as you can tell in our video here, Kevin has a little bit of a height advantage on all the rest of us here, but when he's on a horse, that makes it a little different story too. So you did make some adjustments to raise some of the panels so that we could use horses in this facility.
So. The fabrication folks came and we knocked it out in about 2 days and worked from daylight to dark and got that done, and made things a whole lot easier and able to use the horse and save these old legs some steps.
Real good. So Charlie, as I talked to you just a moment about, I know in another video we talked about low stress and kind of some of the things that you do here from day to day. But when you're here, just remind folks, I know we talked about it on another segment, but just remind folks how important it is and how much effort you put toward low stress and not really, screaming and hollering and beating and banging and that type of thing.
Absolutely. The animals can get just as worked up and just as hot and just as tired as we can when we get frustrated with them, dealing with them. If they don't want to do what we want to do, they can get just as stressed out as we are. And the easier we can make it working on them, the easier they're going to make it on us in the long run.
Absolutely. And it could mean the difference in a conception and a non-conception.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do is, Kevin, I think you're going to take us through how you do it here. And, really, I would say as producers that we take note, because certainly the way it's done here is, in fact, can be duplicated at the farm. Absolutely. And so that's the whole point. Mm-hmm. And so if we can handle our cattle a little easier at the farm. And before we start, Kevin, I'll just make mention of the Ag Enhancement Program through the Department of Agriculture. It's been a great program for many, many years to provide this type of equipment to producers, and through that program, there's an educational component which the University of Tennessee through our extension service is very much involved in. But there is a way in our state for producers to have the facilities they need to reduce the stress, not only on the cattle, but on the cattlemen as well. So, Kevin, if you'll take us through and let us see how you do it here, then we would be very much appreciative.
Absolutely. We'll kind of verbalize it, and later I think we'll have the opportunity for you to follow us through with a set of heifers through this facility. And as Hugh mentioned, as Charlie mentioned, and as John has mentioned, stress can have a negative impact on many things within the beef production industry, but that also bleeds over into the producer's health, right? And the first objective is safe handling for us, the handler. And if you think about it, within the beef cattle industry and agriculture in general, we're probably one of the only industries in the world that have the 5-year-old great-grandson out there with the 90-year-old great-grandfather, right? And every family member in between. And those injuries tend to happen to those kids that are younger and those grandparents and great-grandparents that are older. So if we manage our cattle in a low-stress way and have good facilities, we reduce injury and harm to us as family members, and we have a better time and a more enjoyable time handling our cattle. But another thing that does for us, whenever we handle cattle in a low-stress manner, it makes it more enjoyable. And if it's more enjoyable, we're going to take the opportunity to gather our cattle more often because it's not a stress, it's not a chore, and that gives us the opportunity to participate in added value programs like that 3-month vaccination program that we should all be doing with our calves, pregnancy examination, pre-weaning vaccinations, artificial insemination and estrus synchronization programs that give us the opportunity to add value to the end product that we're producing. Another thing is making sure that we understand how to handle gates. If we handle gates to where we're not clanging and making a lot of noise, the cattle are going to handle better, and it's going to be safer for us when we lock our elbows. If a cow actually bumps into it, we're not going to have to go to the emergency room and let everybody else finish handling the cattle. But just taking cattle through a system, positioning ourselves as the handler in the right spot allows the cattle to know the direction that they prefer to go around us. So it's in essence placing ourselves in a way that it makes the cattle feel like they understand and know where they're going. So there's not a lot of noise. There's not a lot of sticks. I don't think you'll see any sticks or whips or flags or rattle paddles around here anywhere, because those tend to wind up as potential weapons if somebody loses their temper. And actually, they become a crutch, I think. Now, I don't always say people don't need to use those because some people get confidence from them, but really there's not a huge need for that. If we establish within our herd that low-stress mannerism. Now, does it happen overnight? No. We have to work with our cattle. And one thing that Charlie mentioned earlier that's probably the most important thing that we can do in gaining that additive, positive behavioral impact in our herd is just to be around them on a daily basis, truly without expecting anything from them. And then they realize that we are the dominant individual within that herd, not from a fear perspective, but from a stewardship perspective, and they're used to us. And then whenever we want them to move, we place ourselves in the right position to direct them. As we mentioned earlier, one of the most important things in handling stress and reducing stress in the livestock that we're handling is to have good facilities, good gates, good panels, and good pens, because that will actually reduce stress in livestock because they know they can't jump over that gate. They know they can't run through that panel. They know they can't walk through that fence. So that all of a sudden takes away an escape desire and option for them, and then they start paying more attention to the handler. And another thing that does, that gives the handler a higher degree of confidence that he or she is going to be safe, because first and foremost, there's two things that are of utmost importance: that's safety to the handler ourselves and safety to the animal that we are caretakers of and provide stewardship for. So that's something that's extremely important. It's something that's been extremely valuable. Tennessee Farmers Cooperative and the fabrication department came and helped us design this facility and really fabricated all of this equipment, the gates and the pins and the panels, and helped us design the bud box system that we utilize. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go in and take a set of these heifers out and just walk you through the system. It's a 12-foot alley system so that we can handle cattle on foot, or we can handle cattle on horseback, and take them through that 12-foot alley into the bud box, and then from the bud box into the single file alley. And one of the first things that we always want to think about is knowing how many of what class of cattle that we're working with. And these are replacement heifers that we're working with today. It's our spring class that are currently hopefully bred now or getting bred by the cleanup bull. So they're weighing 1,000 pounds, maybe even some of them 1,100 pounds. The 4 will fit comfortably into the single file alley that we're taking. But remember, congestion. It's just like being on an interstate. If you're in heavy traffic, your stress level goes up, right? Well, it's no different than working with livestock. If they get congested and crowded, their stress level goes up. They look for ways to escape, and then that can bring harm to them and to the handler. So knowing that this system will handle 5 or 6 head, we're just going to take 3 to make sure that we don't overcrowd the cattle that we're working with. So we're just going to step into this pen, and we're going to try to do it in a manner where the cattle aren't alarmed. And we're just going to try to sort 3 out. And what we want to do is use that flight zone and think about utilizing the shoulder as the point of pivot and getting these cattle hopefully to come out one at a time so that we can better control the speed with which they move, which also helps from a stress reduction standpoint. So we've got one, and just utilize her shoulder to help her go forward. And now she's going to act as a draw for the second heifer that comes out. So there's 3 heifers that we've got out so that we know they'll comfortably fit into the pen that we're taking these heifers to. And I would say that is the greatest, there's more error made in taking too many cattle to small confined areas from the standpoint of animal injury, human injury, and just stress. So we want to avoid overcrowding as much as we can. So we're just moving these cattle down a 12-foot alley. We're allowing them to find their way by just adding pressure. Whenever they start moving, we'll reduce that pressure a little bit to control their speed. And then we simply walk up. And the key to the bud box design is the gate that closes behind them that actually will in turn direct them to the single file alley that's behind us. So natural instinct for cattle is to move forward until they can't go any further. And when they can't go any further, they want to turn and go back the way they came. And that's why the bud box design works. And it was created by Bud Williams many years ago. And it's one of the tools that we have found has been so impactful on reducing stress and handling cattle because it gives them natural flow. So what we do, we close the gate behind them whenever they enter this bud box design, which is just simply a square or a rectangular chute made of straight panels with 90-degree turns. It'll fit and adapt to most any barn scenario that are on most farms. So it's really easy to design and very low cost. So they've come in, they've stopped, we've shut the gate behind them, we've opened the access gate or the rolling block panel to the single file alley. Now it's up to us as handlers to position ourselves in a way that the cattle will walk around us and find what is the escape, and that's the single file alley. So we just simply come to the near side of the panel and position ourselves to where the cattle move away. And that's at the far side, and turn their heads, and then they'll naturally flow towards the opening. And then we just simply position ourselves to where they move in. And I'll add a little pressure as we go. And if they stop, we'll just wait and add a little pressure. And it's really about pressure and release and not getting too excited. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that people make, whenever those heifers stopped, they'll start, as my grandfather would have said, start hooting and hollering, or start screaming, or had a paddle, a rattle paddle, and started shaking it, or a flag and started flagging it. Well, what that does, that causes stress in the animal because they didn't go in before. Now they're getting too much pressure from behind. Typically what that will elicit is a turn towards you and a run past you. So what I did was basically step forward to add a little more pressure and then reduced that pressure. That allowed them the opportunity to think and then to move forward. And really that's a perfect example of low stress handling. So one thing that we really again want to emphasize is that gates are so important. It keeps cattle confined when we don't want them to go forward. It keeps cattle confined when we don't want them to go backwards. And it also, when they see something open, they know that that's the way for them to go. And again, we just want to utilize that pivot point, which is their shoulder. We walk behind the shoulder, that makes her move forward, and I don't really even have to touch her to get her to do that. Now we have this heifer confined. Many people will have a weigh scale right here prior to the squeeze chute, and if we've handled cattle in a low stress way, you see how calm she stands, and then she can be weighed without a lot of different movements and things. That lets those scales settle quicker, and then we can advance the heifer forward to the squeeze chute, and we simply see that we open that gate. It gives them the opportunity. If she doesn't move, Hugh walks behind her shoulder, she moves forward into the chute. So you notice that this heifer now is confined in a foremost squeeze chute, and we have not touched her with any paddle or stick or flag or our hands from the beginning of the holding area in the back all the way around through the bud box, down the single file alley and into the chute. And she's really maintained a very calm demeanor and disposition, so that the animal health protocol that we're going to be conducting, or the reproductive protocol such as artificial insemination that we're going to be doing, has the best chance for success, because we've reduced one factor that we can control, and that's stress.
So I want to thank Hugh and Kevin and Charlie for being with us this evening, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about low stress cattle handling. A beautiful facility, a beautiful day to be here. And also tell our audience that if you have questions about any of the equipment, you can see your folks at your local farmers co-op. Thank you for joining us this evening.